Hi everybody, so we're back here. So we just got the hull actually set up and generating for the generated object tank. Now we're going to do the turret. So we're going to have to make a prefab for this, and the way we're going to make the prefab is the quickest way possible. Is we're going to just go and find our previous tank, which is in objects, tanks, drag this guy out into the scene, which we're going to be a scene view, not game view. And you know what, we're in here, let's clean up as well. So we've got the Lancer tank body here, and we've got our tank generator here, which I'm going to get rid of. I'm going to drag this over here, and what I want to do is I want to get the turret, and I want to deparent that turret. Yes, break prefab. Give the tank, I just want the turret. We are going to need to clean the turret up. One, we're going to need to find a way we can potentially attach the aim script. The reason for doing this is we don't want to be, I want to say, redoing our scripts every single time we make a new turret. We just want the turret to be nothing but a sprite render and a collider if the turret happens to go off of the tank body. We are going to need to remove the cannons because we don't want these to be being brought in with the turret. The turret needs to be just a turret and just everything else. Let's go ahead and get the turret generating first before we do anything else. So one, we need to come in here and we're going to want to rename this. This is going to be tank, turret, and then we're going to do Lancer after it. So that gets it named properly, so that way when I'm looking through all my objects, because if there's ways to get your stuff in, we'll just use it for a sprite, for example. If I'm going into here, tons of objects in here, if they're not named, it gets really hard to find stuff. But we got our turret now. We're going to leave both these here because at this point, neither of them does anything, except, well, that turret's going to aim, which isn't going to be too big of a deal, so I'm going to ignore it. But we'll leave it in the scene, that way we can play with it if we need to. Should be centered, but we need to just go to our script now, so we were just in there, so this should be really simple. The hard part of doing for this episode is going to be getting everything set up properly. Because we don't want to just be having scripts on our objects that shouldn't be there. And this would be spawn turret. This is where we get the turret data, so we get turret data.prefab. We're going to want to call this a turret object. And then do this right here. Take object.transform. Looks good. That'll get our turret up here. We need to go into our actual turret here, which I'm going to leave the prefab up a layer. Well, yeah, I'll leave it up a layer. It doesn't matter. We're going to anchor that real quick. So when I grab this, I can just drag this on the prefab. Our prefab is there. I don't believe for this tank we need to mess with the offset though. So I'm not going to do the X and Y offset on this one until we have a vehicle that we actually have to worry about it. Because in theory this should center. Because I believe I did design this tank when I made it in paint and everything else to be centered. Now when we make the Weasel scout car, that one's not going to be centered, but we might be able to get away on that one by not centering the body, but centering the turret instead. I don't think we're going to actually have a vehicle that's actually going to take advantage of these two, but I think we'll do a test object later, just so I can make sure that these actually do work, so if I need it in the future, it's very good. And this will be type 1 turret. I want to fill that in real quick. We don't need to mess with rotation. Rotation speed. Let's actually release that real quick. Rotation speed is 5. Rotation offset. I gotta fix this, by the way, in the aim script. We've had this offset in there forever. What that really just comes down to, if I open up a script, is that when we actually do move this and do this little thing here, when we do the rotation part, which is aim at up here, because this is like I made the script as simple as possible when we redid it that one time. And there should be there here. Come on. So in here, when we actually do the aim stuff, there should be a spot in here where we change the axis. I'm trying to figure out where it's at. Oh, I guess we don't actually mess with it. Because here's our rotation offset, here's our angle. So I guess we need that rotation offset, but to be honest, at this point, I might move that rotation offset down here and just leave it in there. The only reason I haven't done that is because I really don't like having what is called a magic number in your code, where you have a number that's there and has no explanation for it being there. It feels kind of weird. Anyways, we'll get the turret spawned, make sure that's working. Now that we get the prefab set up. There we go, that's in there. No guns though. So this is the next step we want to get going. So rather than worrying about our aim script and everything else, because the aim script is not something that's too big of a deal to move around and get copied and everything, let's get the guns working. I really feel like I need to also get the camera zoom. What zoom level would work for this? The big problem with also doing zoom levels, I don't want to do an episode on this, is that if you have a small monitor, it's going to look bad. Though we have kind of fixed the rendering issues and stuff in here for the most part, so I may actually give the player some free agency to change their own zoom level and however they want to play with it. So if they're on a small monitor and they feel like they need to be zoomed more in, maybe we'll do like a plus-minus key thing so you can change the zoom. That'll be something I really should do in another episode. Let me actually get that written down too. That'll be something I definitely should do. So add... I really should probably put this in the design documents on Google Drive, but I have a notepad here, so this works. And that way I can leave it in front of me and I won't forget. Although I did just put that on a drawing, so likelihood is I'm going to miss it. So we got this in here. We can spawn it, which is really cool because this now means if we put more tanks in here, we can very easily actually adapt it. That's all built off of prefab data, so really simple to work with. In theory, what we could even do is actually get rid of our prefabs altogether. The only reason I don't want to do that is because then at that point you're getting into so much data-driven stuff that you kind of remove your ability to build objects quickly. So with this example, if we wanted to make another turret for, actually let's go find the turret here. So say for example, this turret, which I don't know why that's parented on that. Let's fix that real quick, get the scene view collapsed, and hit apply so I make sure I didn't corrupt any data. There's a Lancer turret, there we go, drag this down here. So if I wanted to take this turret here and I make another turret, for example, that was designed for heavier weapons, I can just, for example, change the scale, and that's a new prefab. I can just drag that into the folder and save it. Of course, I wouldn't do that because that texture looks horrible when it's done that way, but I wouldn't need to go through all the work of telling it how to scale and everything else from the data, because once you start having to mess with all this stuff via the data, it actually starts to get a little bit out of hand. And it's one of the things I'm kind of worried about when it comes to the weapon mounts, because how do you calibrate those and get those set up in such a way that it's not a pain in the rear to work with? It's kind of on that aspect of how do I want to mess with getting the weapons on here? Because we have this turret, and even though I am going to change this texture, because you see the guns are built into this, I also need to kind of get that so you can see all 4 barrels. I was originally going to say, okay, you had 4 barrels, but you can only see 2 of them. And I decided, you know what, I actually need to get all 4 barrels drawn on there so you could see them, and that way when I come in later and I add animation to them to make the barrel recoil back when you fire, it's not that hard. The way I'm thinking about actually doing these, if we get paint out real quick, sad thing is I probably will actually even make these in paint, to be honest, is we're going to have a slot like this, and that'll be your slot, and say you would have 4 weapons. So you have 2 next to each other, and then you have 2 like slowly, they would be slightly overlapped, is how we'd end up actually doing them for that cannon right there. When it comes to inserting the weapon in there, we're going to make another texture that just drops right in. It would just sit right in that slot, and it would stick out a little bit. So in the more context here is it would stick there, so you wouldn't see the slot in there, and then you would have the barrel that would come out, and it would look like that. And of course you would duplicate that 4 times to get all your barrels in there. But it would, in theory, look pretty good because, of course, you can just make that everything like that. So that's how we're going to do those. But we got to get those on the turret. And the way I'm thinking about doing this is actually using like transform objects, because we're going to have to instantiate the turret anyways. So the turret is going to have data with it. So what we could do is build the slots onto that turret and pre-build it. So that way we're not coming into our scripts over here, or not our scripts, but our data objects. Now I probably should actually put these data objects in their own folder, but it'll get messy. So we have the slots over here. So what we would have to do is if we actually wanted to put the data in here, because I have an X, Y offset in here as well, which I'm going to leave in here because you could end up with a weapon that when it goes to render needs to have that offset because its prefab doesn't quite work out well. Actually, no, I take it back. We'll probably remove these off here. But what we'll have is we'll have some kind of key reference. So you have a name and then you'll have a key, and the key will correlate to some object on a prefab. So and I think that'll be the quickest way to deal with it, because you'll have your prefab object, and then I can just drag and drop this. For starters, let's go ahead. Let me drag this down here. Let's go find our tank folder. Let's get rid of these guns off the tank. So assets, no, I do want to be assets. That being said, I kind of need to get some of these assets out of here because, like this one, for example, we don't really use that. We've got this turret here, and these are all made off of a Lancer tank, which I need to move to a subfolder at some point. So we have all this in here, and it's layered pretty heavily. Is that actually centered, though? Hold on. The turret might not actually be centered. Let's go... There's a reason I haven't deleted this prefab yet. Image, figure guide. Oh, you can't just turn that off. That's kind of dumb. Oh well. I was trying to see if I could turn the guide off so you can see this. But yeah, that's that turret is not actually meant to be centered on that tank. How far do we want to move it back? So -2. So I guess we do get a chance to mess with that turret. So I guess we'll get that done, and then we'll flip to the next episode of how we want to handle the weapons. Because that'll keep this episode short too, which I'm trying to keep in a habit of doing that. But we'll see how that goes. Because I guarantee at least once I will make an hour-long video. It always happens. So we have our spawn script. So now we are going to need to. We're going to need to make a new vector. So the body, I don't think the body really is ever going to be... Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to have to worry about that. But we are going to have to worry about the transforming here. So we'll do new vector 3. We only care about the X and the Y, so put a comma 0 here. That way we get that started. Then we're going to have to pull that data off of the turret data. So let me go find... Hopefully I didn't just save, so it's not going to spit an error out. Turret data. So we just put this in here, so it's offset X, offset Y, so that'll work. So this should do the trick, because by default this will be 0, so that's going to create for anything that doesn't need the offset, should then 0 out, just like it was doing previously. But then anything that does need the offset, will get that offset value. And in our case, the offset, if we just go back to the turret here, which I'm going to save this, that way we have that. This is going to be... Yeah, -2 will do the trick. So get rid of that. Leave that out of the scene, and now we need to go find our data. I'm hoping this actually even works too. I've actually never, if the original object did not have an offset turret, I don't know if it'll work properly. In theory it should, because of how Unity behaves, it does a lot of the rotation work for you. But then again, I've not played with that, so let's see what happens. So offset Y. Okay, we hit play, it should spawn in. Looks fine. By the way, this is where we get to see the turret down there follow. I'm gonna have a lot of fun. That script works really, really well. I want to do hopefully here in the future, at least one tank that has multiple turrets, simply because that script will follow perfectly. I mean, like, look at that. Where's tracing? It knows where a mouse is at all times. It's great. we get that set up. So I'll see you guys in the next episode.